The meeting's live.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome all members and officers to this Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting, and also welcome to anybody watching online. Before the meeting starts, I would like to invite the committee member and scrutiny manager to explain how proceedings will work and to undertake a roll call of those attending remotely. James.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So I will just quickly run through the people we have joining us remotely. If you can confirm that we can hear you and you can hear us. Rachel Cooper.
Yes, present. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Jeffrey.
Present. Thank you.
Great. Rob Orchard.
Present. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Robson.
Present. Good evening.
Thank you. Chloe Gray.
Present. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jeanette Thompson.
Yes, good evening. Present.
Thank you. And we've got Lewis Franklin on IT support this evening. Is there anyone else joining us remotely who haven't called? No, thank you then. So rules of debate: if a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit in front of you. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will turn red, at which point you can speak. The normal procedure rules in respect of debate and times to speak will apply. Voting: when requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on the microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be visible around the room and will be available on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the chair has the casting vote. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? Nope, thank you. Back to you then, Chair.
Thank you. Apologies for absence. I've received apologies from councillors Carol Stanier and Val Bryant. For Councillor Adam Compton will be late joining us because of train issues. Item 2, the minutes from the last meetings. We've got two meetings, the 6th of September and the 28th of September, which I'll take separately because different members are at different meetings. So minutes of the 6th of September, I would like to propose that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meetings, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 6th of September. Can I have a seconder, please, for that? Thank you, Councillor Nigel Mason. Any comments on that meeting? Nope. Moving on to the minutes of the 28th of September 2022, I would like to propose that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on the 28th of September 2022. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Hunter.
Chairman, I think you should have had a vote on the previous minutes.
Oh, sorry.
And on the second set of minutes, the 28th of September, I wasn't present, okay. So I will not be voting.
Yeah, sorry, can we just go back to that one, please, and just take the vote on the first one? So those in favour of accepting minutes of the 6th of September? Yep. Go to the vote. We'll go to the vote on the 6th of September, please.
Chair, that motion's carried.
Thank you. Going back to where we were, the minutes of the 28th of September. Propose that we take them as a true record. Can I have a seconder for that one, please? Councillor Weeder. Any comments? Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I have to say I'm a little bit concerned on the couple of items on the minutes, particularly on the first one, which was on the waste contract, and the way the minute, we had a fairly robust discussion on the new waste contract and the implications of some of it. And although it says in the minutes that the concerns were raised, I actually felt that the mood of the meeting was that we had more than concerns. We had some doubts and misgivings. And for me, I don't think that truly reflects, I think, some of the issues that were raised by all members of the committee. And it's a shame that Councillor Stanier isn't here tonight, because she raised quite some value. I think she was the first one of the first to speak. She raised an awful lot of issues, particularly for families. And I just don't feel that those doubts, misgivings that have been fully raised within the way these are, it just says concerns, as though we weren't actually worried about what this was that would have on residents. And certainly seeing some of the messages that I'm sure many members have had, I think that also reflects that it's more than just concerns people have. They have some real issues and misgivings of what this service might do for them as families.
I think I probably agree with what you're saying there, and I think we might change the wording slightly to reflect that. Is anybody else want to comment on that one? Does anybody feel that's a fair change? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Compton.
Thanks, Chair. And sorry I'm late for this. I'm not entirely sure if I'm able to comment on the debate, but I do think that's a fair assumption. I have seen.
You're okay.
I have seen what Councillor Strong was going to say, so I did know what she was going to say in advance. And yes, I completely agree. I think there was a lot of misgivings, and it wasn't just some concerns. And I think that was across the board.
Okay, I'm seeing a few nods around the room. So with that amendment on that one, can I go?
Sorry, can I just clarify quickly? Is this in, so where it says following the questions the chair summarised, is that, and it says concerns over the capacity, is that the bit we're looking at?
Yeah, so we're going to change concerns to, I think the words were misgivings.
Doubts and misgivings.
Doubts and misgivings.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we can.
Okay.
And also, I think it was, concerns regarding the large amount of waste, for example, families with nappies. It wasn't just the volume, it was smell as well. I think it was raised by Councillor Stanier.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so can we go to the vote on that one, please? That amendment.
Chair, that's carried with the amendments.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item 3, notification any other business. There is none.
Do we not also need to look at the minutes that are restricted, or do we do that in part 2?
We can do that a little bit later in part 2. If you've got queries on the part 2 minutes.
Well, we haven't approved them yet, have we?
We are moving into part 2 later on.
We'll take them then, will we?
Yeah. Yeah. That does include the part 2, but if you have any queries on the part 2, okay, we will be moving into part 2 later, so I'll give you an opportunity then to bring them up. I'd rather not bring any part 2 stuff.
Not while we're live.
Any part 2 stuff up here, please. Notification of any other business. Have none. Chair's announcements. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recording will be available on the NHDC website and the film recording via the NHDC YouTube channel. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. Item 3. As many of you will be aware, on the 24th of November, Councillor Judy Billing, MBE, passed away. Judy has been a North Herts councillor in Hitchin Bearton for over 40 years, has been a county councillor since 2013. Our thoughts are with Judy's family and friends at this sad time. There will be an opportunity for formal tributes, which will be welcome at the Extraordinary Council on the 19th of December. Thank you. Public participation, I have none, but I will be taking items 16 and 17, which are the part 2 items before item 15. Item 6, urgent general exception items, there are none. Called in items, there are none. Members' questions, there are none. Moving on to item 9 on page 33 of your agenda, Resolutions of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. James, please.
Thank you, Chair. So nothing to really update on what was written in the agenda pack, other than the proposal is to remove the shared waste service governance reference in here, as that's now been approved by Cabinet on the 25th of October. I think everything else is still underway. The task and finish group is still underway. And I'm happy to take any questions that members may have.
Anybody? Councillor Strong.
Yes, just the first item on here, which is the task and finish group, and it says following approval of the committee for the core principles of the review, group leaders will be consulted to appoint members to the task and finish. I do apologise if I have missed this email, but I don't know that I have, and I just wondered when I might get it.
I think perhaps the problem has been that with the change of staff and people leaving, I'm not sure, but if you could fill us in on that.
Yeah. So yeah, I was going to sort of talk about it a bit more in depth in the work program at the end of the thing. But yeah, as Councillor Levitt says, I simply haven't had time with the changeover between me and Will, and then obviously the staffing issues we've had in the department. It hasn't been possible. My plan is to try and get the email out to group leaders prior to the Christmas shutdown, and hopefully then at the same time put in some provisional dates for possible hearings in the new year. And as I say, we've got sort of a few weeks to do that over the next couple of weeks before Christmas. And I apologise that I haven't managed to get round to it so far.
Thank you, James. And I think we all appreciate how hard committee services are working at the moment because of the staff issues. So I think sometimes a little bit of patience is needed on those. So no, Councillor Compton. Adam.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a quick question. I wasn't on this committee when the Design and Sustainability SPD team was sort of asked to mobilise, if you like. What does that involve? Am I able to ask that? Because I was just wondering, based on the fact that we've got a large sustainability policy coming tonight, is that something that would feed into that normally, or is that something that should be feeding in and hasn't, or is it something that's completely separate or will feed in after the fact?
I'm trying to. Could you explain a little bit more on
the resolutions of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, item 2, which was the Design and Sustainability SPD. I didn't know what it was, to be fair, so I was just wondering, or the strategic planning team, and it was, the recommendation was agreed to Cabinet. The strategic planning team will organise this when appropriate to do so. I was just wondering, because we've got the new sustainability policy coming tonight, whether that was feeding in or is yet to mobilise and therefore hasn't fed in. And
Sure,
sorry,
yeah, so that's it's in relation to the local plan. So I think we couldn't do anything on that until the local plan was adopted, but now that it's adopted, so SPDs are strategic planning documents, if anyone wants to correct me. But yeah, so that's what it will be, and I think it's a case that will now be acted by the strategic planning team following the adoption of the local plan.
I'm sure they will be taking the sustainability strategy into account because when they did that. So the recommendation is to note the report. Do I have a proposer, please, for that one? Councillor Compton, second, and Councillor Strong. If we move the vote, please, on that one.
Chair, that motion's carried.
Thank you. Moving on to item 10, which is on page 35 of your agenda, Climate Change Strategy 2022 to 2027. Councillor Steve Jarvis to present. Steve.
Thank you. So this is an update of the climate change strategy to roll it forward and to reflect changes that have occurred since the last version of the document. So it updates references to updated government policy, the fact that we now have a climate change implementation group and an implementation officer group, and refers to some of the work that we're doing on mitigation and adaptation, some of which is being done in conjunction with the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership. The objectives of the strategy in terms of achieving a carbon neutral council by 2030, a resilient council operations as a resilient to climate change, a net zero carbon district by 2040, and resilience across the district remain unchanged. As to the principal areas of action, taking action on the council's own emissions, enabling savings in the community by nature of the policies that we have adopted, and inspiring the community to go out and save emissions themselves, they all remain unchanged. There are updated proposed actions, which are annotated in the list of actions. But some major areas they cover are around the whole question of offsetting. Quite a lot of work has been done on assessing what the council's carbon emissions are, what the obvious scopes for reduction are, and what the opportunities for offsetting within North Hertfordshire are. And it's clear from that offsetting is likely to require a combination of tree planting for carbon sequestration and renewable energy generation. But there's quite a lot of work still to be done in terms of identifying how we can accommodate the likely required level of offsetting. So there are some actions in there in terms of identifying what needs to be done there. There are some proposals to move on from our current policy of requiring new vehicles to be ultra low emission to require new vehicles to be zero emission from 2025, where that is possible. There are also there's a section of the documentation that covers the progress we've made, and that's been updated to cover progress to date. So I think I'll leave it there as an introduction, but obviously I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Steve? I've got a little one, Steve. You said we're working to looking at our own emissions levels and everything like that. Have we got that sort of figure yet? And is there how do we compare to any other authorities?
There's a lot of work being done on assessing what our actual emissions are, and they are approximately 4,000 tonnes of CO2 equivalent per year. Georgina will tell me if I've got that number slightly wrong, but I think that's within a few tonnes of the total number. That's about the emissions that one would expect, I think. One of the issues is that councils have gone about making this assessment in a variety of different ways. And it also depends on what you include. Everybody has to include all the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. So scope 1 emissions are emissions from fuel which the council burns directly. So for example, gas or diesel or petrol in vehicles, plus scope 2 emissions, which are indirect ones. So scope 2 emissions are largely electricity. We have included a degree of scope 3 emissions, which are other emissions, if you like, relating to staff commuting, because that's something where the council's policy have a significant impact on the levels. Councils have also taken different views about how they deal with emissions from contractors. And the view that we have taken is that essentially emissions from Abeza, from John O'Connor, are the council's emissions. And we're not about trying to achieve zero emissions just by transferring them to a contractor. You know, we specify how those contracts are to operate. We need to take responsibility for the emissions that come from those. So from that point of view, an apples with apples comparison with different councils is not entirely easy. There is an LGA model, which has been used by some, but not all. So, but having looked at what I've seen from elsewhere, I think we're in the right ballpark. Well, right, we're in a similar ballpark to other councils if you take into account all those variables.
Right. Thank you for that. That was most helpful actually for that one. It's Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a thought on whether you've looked at this, Steve, and I know that there's a big policy around about employees of the council staying at home and not coming to work, and working in the offices here, but always the but you could have 10 employees who come in and work in a shared heated space, which means that there are 10 spaces of their homes that are unheated. So from a sort of efficiency of energy, it would be a saving surely to have 10 people together in an office versus heating 10 spaces. And there's also particularly for those employees maybe that live local to the office who maybe work or cycle. Again, I can see that pushing always the work from home policy might not always create savings on energy. I just wondered if you thought that, if you actually given it any consideration.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of considerations about who works in the office and who works from home. And apart from those relating to climate change, one does, of course, need to consider both the nature of the job and the individual circumstances. I think we know that during lockdown, there were some people working in profoundly unsuitable circumstances at home. And there are some people who would frankly never see anyone from one week's end to the next and need for all sorts of social and mental health reasons to be working in an office. And there are some who can't do their job other than in an office. There are also different considerations about what people's emissions are likely to be. Clearly, if someone lives alone and doesn't heat their premises during the day and can walk to council offices, then their emissions would probably be lower if they were here. If they drive a considerable distance, they live in a house with other people, which will be heated anyway during the day, then the balance would be dramatically the other way. I think on balance, we need to provide staff with flexibility. We need not to insist that they are in a place that they don't need to be. And their energy consumption is merely one of the things that needs to be taken into account. So it varies, and I think there needs to be flexibility. But we certainly need to consider moving away from the situation where we ask staff to travel when they didn't need to, really.
Yeah, thank you for that. You want to come in on that one?
I was just going to add that the LGA, who provide guidance on this kind of thing, have kind of started looking at this. But at the moment, there's only really quite crude ways of calculating it because it's so complicated depending on, if you've got another person in the house, so the house might already need to be heated, the level of insulation of your house, how energy efficient it is. I think generally, as you kind of picked up on, the impression is that for people that walk and cycle that are that close, it's often better for them to be in. But for people that drive, I think more than like 20 minutes or something, then typically it isn't. And there's also the seasonal aspect as well that you have to take into account. So in the summer, typically you don't really need people driving because they're not heating their homes, but then in the winter it's different. So they are looking into it, the LGA, to try and provide some guidance on it. But at the moment, it's just so complicated because there's so many factors.
Yeah.
My question actually was it something that we were looking at? So thank you for saying, yes, it's something, and it is complex. I reckoned it would be complex, but I just didn't know whether or not it was something we'd actually picked up on and were looking at, but thank you.
Thank you for that one. Councillor Hunter, Tony.
Obviously, it's a difficult task, especially when you start to move on to encouraging residents to make behaviour changes. Is there a programme of literature and meetings, etc., that are going to happen over the following year?
You're absolutely right. It's by far the most difficult part of the strategy, but it's also by far the most rewarding if we get it right. The council's carbon emissions are probably maybe half, maybe 1% of the district's emissions. So even if we reduce those to zero, that's not going to make a big impact on the district's emissions. The reason why it's important for doing it is largely because that is part of the community leadership role, and that we have to set an example and demonstrate what can be done, as well as saving that bit of carbon ourselves. In terms of changing behaviour, I mean, there are a number of aspects. I mean, so there's some things that have already been done. The Solar Together PV rooftop PV scheme is an example of providing some community leadership. It's encouraged people to think about whether or not they should put PV panels on their house. Some of them have signed up, some have committed to do it, but I've spoken to people who didn't actually participate in the scheme, but are now thinking about whether or not they can do it. And we've created an interest in it. And I'm keen that we should try and replicate that in other areas, where we can make people think about things. Changing people's behaviour is a complex business, and it needs to be done in different ways. The Environment Panel is a way to engage with those members of the community who are interested in this sort of thing. The council has agreed that it will appear at the green events, one green event in each town a year, and we didn't decide that till after Baldock had theirs this year, but we participated in the events in Hitchin and Letchworth and Royston and spoke to people there. We always intended to have a programme of talking to schools, because we recognise the influence that children can have on their parents. That hasn't happened so far because the pandemic got in the way of that, and schools have only recently got back to a point where they're willing to engage with things like that. But that's certainly something that we will be intending to do. As with many things, there is no single solution. There are lots of things that we can do in terms of influencing the community's behaviour. The Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership has got one of its 5 themes relates to behaviour change, and the recognition that there is quite a lot of science behind how people make decisions and how you change them. And there's quite a lot of work needs to go into figuring out how we can get people to make better decisions in terms of reducing their emissions. And the process will inevitably involve sort of some carrot and some sticks, some incentives to do the right thing, some disincentives to do the wrong thing. But it's very much an area where we need to work with across the community and with partners in other parts of local government.
Thanks, Steve. Adam.
Thanks, Chair. Steve, it's quite interesting to read about, the achievements and what we've done so far, and hats off to the officers who have done quite a lot, it would seem. Particular one thing I wasn't too sure about is you mentioned some scope 3 emissions are in, some scope 3 emissions are out, and I appreciate that the strategies for scope 1 and 2, how much work has been done around scope 3, which to my mind in layman's terms is all around the supply chain and all of our contractors, and that covers absolutely everything from IT contracts all the way through to a BASA, so on and so forth. Is there sort of any plan of what goes into our strategy and achievements, and what's excluded?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right that scope 3 emissions are complex, and there's a question of how far down the supply chain you go. As I indicated earlier, we've taken the view that there are some suppliers who, because of their relationship with the council, they are scope 3 emissions simply because we've decided to contract out an activity. And John O'Connor's ground maintenance and Obesa's recycling and waste services are 2 examples of those, where we have asked them to deliver a particular service, and we are counting the direct emissions, so they're scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. What we're not doing is counting John O'Connor's scope 3 emissions, so we're not counting the carbon that's represented by their trucks being constructed, for example, but we are counting the carbon represented by the diesel that they use. those are the principal areas where we're looking at Scope 3 emissions, other than those that relate to commuting. We are also including, actually there is another one, sorry, those are two of the three. The other area where we're counting emissions, which we could say are not ours, is in the question of the leisure centres, where we are counting the Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions from the leisure centres as well. I mean, the council could reduce its carbon emissions by about 60% if we just stopped counting the leisure centres and said that was Stevenage Leisure's problem, and stopped counting the refuse freighters and said that was a Baser's problem. I don't think that's the approach that our residents expect, and I don't think it'd be the right thing to do. It does introduce a bit of complexity, but I'm afraid this is a complex business.
Thanks, Steve. Totally agree with you on that. If we're creating it, we should be responsible for it. Adam, did you want to come back? Or?
Thanks, Steve. That was actually quite useful. What I think my question probably wasn't worded in the best way, but you did cover kind of a follow-up question I may have had. So if we looked at, say, we're looking at the major contracts and taking those Scope 3s, and that makes perfect sense as a starting point. I suppose my next question is, are we looking then at all of our direct supply chain? So I'm not talking about their subcontractors, because that is completely fair. You're never going to get that in a month of Sundays unless you've got an entire council working purely on sustainability and carbon emissions. But just looking at the contracts register for North Herts, we've got companies that maintain and repair car parks, and we've got various IT contracts and magazine distributions and all of those sorts of things. Are we able to have a timescale on when or if we're likely to look at the direct suppliers we've got? Because what I feel like is we're covering the large area, and I appreciate Scope 1 and 2 is what's in the strategy, and this is Scope 3, but it's not a huge amount to spend in the grand scheme of things for a district council to look at the main suppliers across the board and think, bear in mind, there's various mechanisms now that we can look and just see what our Scope 3 is. Not saying that we aim to bring that down to zero, but would it be possible, or is there something that we're looking into to actually see what the rest of our suppliers are doing, see actually what we can do? I know the procurement policy is coming up at FAR tomorrow, but that's the kind of thing that maybe the procurement team could have a little bit more sort of input in when we go out to tender and say, actually, we want all our Scope 3 emissions to be at least recorded in some way, shape or form. I'm not saying necessarily get rid of it, because that's impossible, but certainly look at getting that data so we can feed back into absolutely everything and have a broader picture. I'm not sort of silly enough to think we'll get the whole picture, but certainly get a broader picture to see what else we can do as the next steps, or continue to do in conjunction with this Scope 1 and 2 emissions that we are looking at.
I mean, I think there's some interesting points there. I mean, I guess two observations about going out to further suppliers. In some respects, what we're buying from Stevenage Leisure, from John O'Connor, and from Baser is a customised service that they're delivering on our behalf, where we're specifying exactly what they should do. When we're buying a service such as distribution of Outlook, we're essentially buying a standard off-the-shelf service from someone. And the other issue is, of course, that we have quite a lot of suppliers who we deal with on a one-off or occasional basis. So at the moment, we've looked at those that represent the majority of the council's contracted out activities. I think probably I think absolutely that we need to make sure that our procurement policies are reflecting our climate objectives. There are some models about assessment of other emissions, whether or not they're adequate for capturing Scope 3 emissions, I'm a bit unclear about, but there is certainly some work that the LGA has done there. I think that it's something we need to think about. I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that nearly 30% of our emissions are from refuse lorries, a bit more than 30% are from leisure centres. We need not to put a disproportionate amount of effort into chasing the 1% from some much more marginal activity. So I think it's an interesting point. We need to think about it. We need to think about how we can do it in a way that would be proportionate.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I was just going to I'd possibly put a little extra recommendation in there that the revised procurement policy, used your words exactly, reflects the climate change strategy for contracted services. So I think might be a nice little thing to recommend. A couple of other little points I wanted to pick up, and you mentioned about going out to schools and education and the sort of the power really is what you're looking at. My daughter teaches environmental science at Thomas Lane School in Stevenage, and they've been quite heavily into that for some time now, and won a couple of awards based on it. And it does work. Getting the schools involved, it does get the parents involved. During COVID, they were actually collecting all the scrap kits after they'd finished with them and recycling them, sending them back. I don't know what they did with them, but they certainly collected hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. The other thing was, is there the industrial side of North Herts, industry in North Herts, is there any outstanding contributor to climate, to emissions within that? Yeah, the industry within North Herts, is there any? Is there, I know we haven't got any steelworks or anything like that, but have we got any particular major contributors to carbon emissions?
I think there are one or two organisations in North Herts that probably do represent significant amounts of emissions. I think that, I mean, the view we've taken is that engagement with certainly with larger businesses is probably more appropriately done via the LEP, and the LEP is part of the Hertfordshire Climate Change and Sustainability Partnership. In terms of small businesses, I mean, we've had some discussions about a scheme that West Suffolk Council operates, which essentially puts PV panels on the roofs of business premises and then sells them the electricity. And I know that Steve Crowley's team is looking into whether or not we could do something like that. And I've had some discussions with some local business owners who say that they'd be really keen. It would help them at the same time as generating the council some income. So I know Steve Crowley is looking into whether or not that can be made to work. So there are some ways in which we can engage with smaller businesses, leaving larger businesses to deal with the LEP, essentially.
Right, thank you very much for that. I've got nobody else indicating to speak on that. So the recommendations we have that the Cabinet adopt the following documents, taking into consideration additional actions proposed under each priority area. Appendix 1, the Climate Change Strategy 2022 to 2027. Appendix A, the proposed actions. Appendix B, the achievements. And if we can put in that extra recommendation about when you're revising the procurement policy, that it reflects the Council's climate change strategy for contracts. Can I have a proposer for those recommendations, please? Alistair?
Sorry, Chair. I was just going to ask, I had to step out briefly. So will that affect my right to vote? I think it will.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, okay. Can I have a proposer, please, for those recommendations? Thank you for as Councillor Weeder. Seconder, please. Councillor Compton, Adam, thank you. If we can go to the vote, please, on that one.
Chair, that motion's carried.
That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 11. Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy, which is on page 65 of your agenda. We were going to have Councillor Hardberg presenting remote. Do we have? Right, Georgina. So Georgina, if you could present, please.
So yeah, this is to propose a revised equality, diversity and inclusion strategy, so an EDI strategy. The previous strategy was created in 2017 and that was just an equality strategy. So this time there's kind of an additional focus on diversity and inclusion. So the strategy lays out our legal responsibilities as a council. And one of those duties is to publish specific equality objectives. And then it sets out our commitment beyond that legal duty. So we were quite keen to kind of indicate that we care about equality, diversity and inclusion beyond the fact that we have a legal duty to fulfill certain roles. And then it lays out 4 objectives. So we have 2 objectives which kind of centre around residents in the community. So the first one is working with young people through youth engagement to make it easier for them to have their voices heard in local decision making and democracy. The second one is improve our engagement with marginalised, seldom heard and new communities to make it easier for them to participate in local decision making and democracy and to have their views and experiences heard by the council. And then we've got one which is kind of more focused around the council as an employer. So improve our understanding of broader EDI issues and their impacts, such as neurodiversity and economic disadvantage, as well as the intersections between inequalities using our inclusion group as a channel. And then the last one is around achieving consistency in measuring the likely equality impacts of our emerging policies and services. So that's kind of looking at the equality impact assessments that we do and making sure that there's a kind of standardized and high quality way of completing those. Yes, I think that's the kind of gist.
Thank you, that's Georgina. Any questions on this one, please? And this was Councillor Judy Billings' baby, this one. So it would have been nice for her to see it go through, but it is quite significant changes since last time as well, because it's 2017, it says in the report, last time we had any change on it. Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. Don't have any issue with updating this and the way it is. The only question I did have, and that's in the appendix and the glossary, and I wondered why that had come and why what's in the glossary is in the glossary.
Looked at a bunch of different glossaries from different EDI strategies, and then we tried to kind of build in, as well as having terms that are mentioned in the strategy, I suppose we've kind of tried to have it as a document that people can refer to if they're unsure about some of the issues, appreciating that some people can find it quite a complicated topic and there's lots of different terms, there's kind of new terms that come out all the time. So it's kind of trying to give a broad view of both the protected characteristics, some of the legal terms that are referred to, plus a kind of wider view of terms that people might encounter if they're starting to think about equality, diversity and inclusion as an agenda. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think it is sometimes helpful to have some of these phrases defined, as it were. The one I noticed wasn't on there was unconscious bias or unconscious, which I think is something we've heard quite a lot of. Adam.
It's a trivial point, but I thought it was quite important, sort of trivial in just a fact of a change of wording potentially in the main document, not trivial in its context. It's got in the glossary that BME or BAME, whilst accepted, as with people of colour, others consider these terms to be overly broad or simplistic. But we've got it in our main policy. So if we think it's too broad and simplistic, I completely agree. I think that's, if that is the case, then could we maybe consider changing it? Because people of colour wasn't actually listed in the rest of the glossary. I know it's probably a minor point to many, but if people do feel that that's overly simplistic, should it be in our policy, or should we use what seems to be implied is that we should use people of colour? But that's a very minor point.
Where was it in the main document? I've just done a Control F, but I can't.
Sorry, You haven't used BME, but you've got Black minority ethnic written in full in the strategy. I think it was, let me find it. So I've come off it now.
Under the second objective.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So I suppose in that context, we've used it because we're kind of saying this is not an exhaustive list. And I think Judy was quite keen that our work that we've been doing with some Black and minority ethnic groups was reflected without kind of listing out every group that we have worked with. But I think it was felt that was sort of acceptable, given that it's kind of part of a list that says it's not exhaustive, and that it's not kind of just the acronym.
I'm happy with that. But the only other point was that we've got, as with people of colour, bracket C below, but I couldn't see that listed below in the glossary. So I just wanted to make sure that we were being as informative as possible.
We'd like to see maybe people of colour in the glossary.
Seems to infer that it's listed in the glossary, but it's not. That's what threw me when we were saying it in the glossary, but then not in the strategy itself. But it's really minor point. Thank you.
Thank you. You beat me to that one because it said C below, and I did look below and it wasn't there. So you beat me to that one. So thank you for that, Claire.
Yeah, if we pick up any ones that we think are missing, or perhaps want any sort of look, can we just refer to you off and ask your advice on whether or not? I mean, will this glossary get changed as we?
I don't see why it couldn't be added to or changed if people feel there's a term that's not in there, or yeah.
So I would hope that, you know, if we suddenly think, oh, that would have been useful to put that in the glossary, it could be what I call a living document, and make it such so that anybody that sees it or wants to raise something on it, and then it just, I don't know how it sort of, we sign up that other changes have been made, but I think we know how far we've moved since the last time. And I think, again, as people read it and see it, there's likely that there might be comments that would be think, oh, that should have been in there. And rather than sort of formally bring it up, even if you do it with a sort of like a track change document, and it comes back the next time we perhaps see it, and then we can see if the changes are, because I don't think anything that's going to be put in or taken up, or, you know, I'll say sort of spruced up a bit, whatever, that if we somebody thinks, oh, that's perhaps not the right wording, but if we could do it that way, I think that would be useful. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Bacher, Raj.
I need to prep. Yeah. So just on the point of as with people of colour, can I just ask where this was adopted from? Just because as somebody of colour, I don't appreciate being referred to as somebody coloured. So is that something that can be taken out?
Where are you referring to in the main document?
So in the glossary, it says, though accepted by many as with people of colour, I kind of find that quite offensive. So if we could put other than white ethnic background rather than people of colour.
Sorry, that should probably be in quotation marks, as in like the term rather than referring to a grouping. Does that make sense? So as with the term people of colour, others consider that not to be a term that is acceptable. Does that make sense?
So what I'm confused. So you're saying people as of colour is a term that isn't accepted?
No, that so although BME or BAME is accepted as a term by some people also some people of colour also may not like the term people of colour and may want to be referred to, I suppose, as specifically Black, or does that make sense?
My point is that referring to somebody from a Black, Asian, ethnic minority background as somebody of colour is offensive. That's what I'm trying to allude to. Right. And as somebody who is Asian, Indian myself, I don't appreciate being referred to as somebody who of colour. Does that make sense?
I think that's what I think I'm agreeing with you. I think I'm saying that should be in quotation marks. So it's saying the term people of color is not accepted as a term by some people. I think we're agreeing.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, that makes sense.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to clarify.
Yes.
Just because I find that very offensive.
Yes, exactly. And that's why it should say as with, and then the term people of color. Others.
Yeah, I think there needs to be some change to that just because it can be quite confusing. Is that okay?
Yes. Would you like me to run it past you if I kind of to check that we're on the same page?
Please, if you could.
Thank you. It just shows how complicated and sensitive this whole issue is. Adam.
Yeah, just confirm that it was confusing, because I read that initially thinking that it wasn't supposed to be BME or BAME anymore, and it should have been. And I did think that was strange. So I think maybe that paragraph could maybe be worded, because that's why I was looking in the glossary thinking, well, really, and that's why I was looking for it. So I think maybe that paragraph, could do with a tweak to make it quite clear.
Okay, thank you for that. Got nobody else indicating to speak on this one. So the recommendation are that the Cabinet recommended to approve the Council's Equality of Diversity and Inclusion Strategy 2022 to 2027 as attached to Appendix 1 with amendments as agreed. Alistair?
Yeah, I'd like to propose if that's one. Chair.
Okay, thank you. And approve the equality objectives as set out below. So Alistair's proposed that one. Can I have somebody to second, please? Claire, thank you. If we can move to the vote, please.
Share that motion's carried.
Thank you. Passed unanimously again. Thank you again. Moving on to item 12, information note 3C's half-year update. Chris Jeffries on page 97 of your agendas.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So the information note provides an update on the first 6 months performance of 2022-2023 regarding the 3Cs for the council and its contractors. I'll just go through and highlight some of the key points from the report. So for the period of April to September this year, compliments received by the council and contractors increased, whereas comments and complaints both decreased. It's worth noting that the leisure centres received 131 compliments. In particular, North Harts Leisure Centre saw an increase from 12 logged last year in this period to 56 logged this year so far, with a range of compliments regarding the pool, the staff and the facilities. The number of complaints received directly to the council decreased by 38%. Looking at the totals for the service areas, planning control and environmental health saw the highest number of complaints. This can be directly linked to the decrease in the number of complaints resolved within 10 days. And in particular, environmental health saw staff absences mixed with high complex workloads. There have been 18 stage 2 complaints and 4 of which were deemed justified. The local government ombudsman received 8 complaints during this period, 4 of which were closed after the initial inquiries, and 1 that was upheld, but no further action required as the council had already remedied the situation. At this stage, I welcome any comments or questions that you might have on the information note. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments on this one? Nobody? Okay, and that is report just to note. Thank you. Moving on to item 13, North Harts Museum Strategy 2022 to 2026 on page 105 of your agenda. Councillor Keith Hoskins.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is quite straightforward. This comes forward because the last strategy that this council had was, I think, about 10 years ago, and all that has happened with the museum service around that time, as many of you will remember, the reorganisation of it. This is overdue, but I commend this document to you. I think it's very good. It's succinct, it's to the point, tells you exactly what we want to do, and I thank the officers who put the effort in to do it.
Thank you, Keith. And actually, looking at it, there was quite a good response to the questionnaires as well on the draft strategy. It's quite a good one, that one. Comments, questions, please, from anybody? No. So the recommendations are that the current draft strategy, the museum strategy 2022-2026 be approved, and that the council committee adopt the strategy for the years 2022 to 2026. There's no other recommendations. I'll propose that one. Can I have a seconder for it, please? Councillor Strong. And if we could move to the vote, please, James.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item 14, quarterly update on the council delivery plan on page 123. Rachel Cooper to present. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. This is the latest monitoring report on the new format council delivery plan. This brings together the project's risks and performance indicators into one document. Council delivery plan was first brought before this committee in March 22 and then subsequently approved for monitoring by Cabinet. It's intended to be a live document, so projects will come on and off the report throughout the year. And also the risks will change as projects progress, and this will be reflected in the narrative provided. It's meant to provide a high-level overview of progress made against the council plan, but committee members are able to request a more detailed report on specific projects. So any of the projects listed in Appendix A, we can get more detail on that if requested. Any proposed changes to milestones have to be agreed by Cabinet, and these are highlighted in green on Appendix A. So page 127 Appendix A shows the status key for the project's PIs and risks. Each project is listed separately with the corresponding risks and PI if available. So the grey line on each one shows the status of the project. So we've got the red, amber, green, and a percentage completed. And at the September meeting, this committee requested that milestones be added into the monitoring report, and these have now been provided. So the orange section identifies risks which may affect the delivery of the project, and the risk status with a green tick being low risk, amber is medium, and red is high risk status. And then the blue section identifies if a performance indicator is available with the green, amber and red statuses that we're used to seeing. So there are 30 projects listed on Appendix A. We're currently showing 3 red PIs, 1 amber PI, and there are some proposed changes to milestone dates. So I was just going to pick out a few to bring to your attention. So page 128, the museum Hitchin Town Hall recovery. Project status is good, but we're currently showing a red indicator. Although it's showing as red, officers are confident that the increase in visitor numbers expected over the Christmas period will help to bring that PI back on track. Page 132, the cycling network. Currently, there are some missed milestone dates there. We are reliant on HCC timescales on this project, so we are actually proposing to change the milestone dates in line with those. Page 133, the EV charging for council vehicles. So this project has been delivered. So the status is good on the project, but the PI is showing a red status at the moment. This is because the target was based on a full year usage and the charging stations were only installed on the 17th of August. Also, we have not yet procured the full fleet of electric vehicles, so we're expecting that performance indicator to improve. Page 136, help residents make payments at convenient locations. So again, project is more or less delivered here. We have some communication to residents that will be ongoing, but the PI indicator is showing as red. Mainly the payment indicator is due to late payment by one particular customer. So the debt has now been cleared subsequent to this report. It is expected that it will be a while before the impact of this project filters through to the PI indicator for electronic payments. So page 140 relates to the local plan. As we know, that's now been adopted, and all the milestones set for the 22-23 year have now been completed. Further milestones will appear, which will go on into the 23-24 year. And the risk level currently remains high because we're still in the 6-week window for a judicial review, which commenced on the 23rd of November. Following that period, the risk will be reassessed, and the risk level dropped because a lot of the risk related to adoption of the plan, which has now happened. And then page 143, the response to government resources and waste strategy. So the project is on track for the shared waste contract, but we have an amber indicator for recycling rates. The significant dry periods during the summer and beyond have impacted on the amount of garden waste that was collected during that period. So it's therefore unlikely that we will meet our target by year end. So finally, I was just going to say that all the detail behind the project's risks and PIs is available to view in Pentana, which is our performance and risk software. And a guest login is provided on the intranet along with a procedure note on how to view the data. So finally, just to say, as mentioned previously, you are able to request a more detailed update. So if there's anything in Appendix A you'd like a deep dive into, then those requests can come forward, and we'll make sure that's in place for the next meeting. And that's all I was going to say on that one. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I was just going to come back on the local plan one, and I say that as you say, the main risk left at the moment is any legal intervention, judicial review. I suppose we still have the hostile applications outside, even though we've we've adopted the plan, but we still have that risk carried forward that we get applications for areas outside not covered by the local plan. Would we look at that as a change? I know once the legal dates, challenge dates thing, would that remain on as a risk though?
Yes, Chair. Once the JR period has completed, the service area will review and update the risk. So the risks that are no longer in place will be removed from the risk description, but then further risks can be added. As I say, it's a live document now, so the risks will evolve as the project evolves.
Thank you for that. And it's quite easy to see all that stuff together now in one place. I think that's now achieving its aim the way that report comes through with everything in there. The recommendations on, Councillor Strong, Claire.
Yeah, thank you. I'm looking on page 147, and that's the Shared Prosperity Fund project.
Yeah.
Obviously waiting for feedback, and so the date is changed. I'm having a total blank to know exactly what was submitted and I wondered where I could find that easily.
I
Plan.
don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I can certainly find that out for you and send that on after the meeting.
Thank you. That would be useful. It's agreed.
Thank you for that one. Okay, so recommendations on this are that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee comment on the Council Delivery Plan Monitoring Report, including recommendations to Cabinet, i.e. that Cabinet notes the progress against council projects as set out in a Council Delivery Plan, including changes to milestone dates and risk, and the Cabinet notes the completion of the local plan milestones for this year. Finally, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee determine any project they want to receive more detail. I don't think we've got anything coming up at the moment, but as this is a live document, we can always keep adding at any time. Do you have a proposer for those recommendations, please? Thank you, Councillor Willoughby. Alistair Willoughby. Seconder, please. Councillor Weeder. Can we move to the vote, please?
Chair, that motion's carried.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to move, a slight change in the agenda. We go to item 16, exclusion of press and public. And I propose that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and the public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that the following report will involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the said Act as amended. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Strong. Thank you. Go to the vote on that, please.
Thank you, Chair. That's carried. And we'll just move into part 2.
Thank you. Just take a pause there while, if anybody wants a short comfort break while we're just moving into part 2. Now's the time. Anybody need time? Give 5 minutes. Thank you for that. That's passed. Item 18, last item on the agenda, overview and scrutiny committee work programme. James.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, just a few updates from me. Just to say that 8.7 in the report refers to the action plan at Appendix B. It should be Appendix C. December on the work programme has been covered after the meeting this evening. The call to account was completed on the 28th of September, as we've just discussed. And the Chair's report is currently being written and is expected at the the ONS meeting in January, and that has been included on the work programme now. Lord Lister update from the strategic housing manager, which was requested at the call to account, has been listed as to be scheduled. So happy to have suggestions from members on that. And the other thing is we have crime and disorder coming to the committee in January. So I've gone to the police before, and I think we've mentioned before, they've asked for some more specifics. So I'm sort of suggesting, open to comments on this, antisocial behaviour in town centres from the police and telephone scams from possibly Citizens Advice or another charity doing similar work as possible topics. But as I say, happy to have member comments or member suggestions as to anything further. And just to say again, task and finish group is on my radar, and hopefully pick it up in the next couple of weeks, and I'll be in touch with group leaders.
I think Councillor Bryant wanted that antisocial behaviour to cover safety on the streets as well, feeling of safety on the streets as well. So if we could sort of wind that into that one, please. Claire.
Yeah, the one I want penciled in.
Yep.
For March. On the police one, on the crime and disorder, absolutely, I think we need some feedback from the police, particularly in respect to what one heard at the planning meeting, that we can't get information from them to support antisocial behaviour and the effect of crime, and that in particularly on the planning application we saw last Thursday. So I think that is an absolute must. And also I think my kind of also thinking, seeing what I see coming through from the owl alerts, there seems to be an increase in burglary, particularly properties. So I'd be interested to know whether or not that is just me seeing more owl alerts on it, or whether there is an underlying trend, and also what are the police doing about it.
Thank you for that. I think on that antisocial behaviour thing, when looking at it, it is exactly how they classify and allocate antisocial behaviour to, how a report's received and how they allocate report and what they do with that report. I think that would be quite useful to a lot of people, because we hear a lot, as Claire was mentioning, like the last planning meeting, we get one person saying, there is no reports here, and somebody else saying it's 24 incidents logged. So it would be nice just to see how they sort of allocate that.
Just to clarify that, so you'd rather than sort of the statistics themselves, you'd rather have an update on how they report, how they process it, how they report it, how they deal with it. Rather than just broad statistics, which I think we can get as a emailed round anyway. We don't need, and they'll update usually at area committees as well.
Councillor Compton, Adam.
Thank you, Chair. From my point of view, I think it would be really useful to get a regular report on climate change around the proposed actions for the new strategy. As an example, what I'm sort of looking at, and I quite agree with all the points, but just looking at council buildings and property in the proposed actions, I think the word ensure, consider, identify, or increase incorporation was numbered sort of in 2/3 of those. It would be good to sort of have something where you can actually see what's actually happening when it's happening, because otherwise I fear that we're not actually going to see much report or many reports until the next one.
Yeah.
It'd be quite useful to see progress and challenge anything where we feel like we should be doing more.
Thanks for that. Yeah. Yeah, I think it could be one we could schedule regularly. I don't think we need it every month, but I think sort of quarter. I think schedule it quarterly. And that's a good idea. Claire.
Just on the back of that, I know we've put the panels on the building here. Do we actually had any feedback? Oh, he's gone.
He's gone.
He's gone. Where did Steve go? He's gone. I just wondered whether we'd had actually any feedback on actually how much electricity that's actually generating. It might be useful to actually again sort of do a look back. We've put them up. Did they meet what we expected? Have they overdone? Just to get some feedback on that. And the other thing I wanted was an update on the peer review that we had. We haven't seen any feedback or the report from that. I think that perhaps ought to come back to us at Scrutiny, so we should look at that as well. Because there is a report about the first peer review, but this was the additional peer review that finished. I understand there is a report received, but it'd be nice to think if it came here.
Yeah, I've not seen it yet either. So yeah, we would like to see that, I think. Yeah. But I shall bring that up with my meeting with Jeanette, actually. Yeah, I think the idea about looking at the solar panels and what they've contributed in that. And again, but I think it's a little bit soon at the moment. So possibly if we look at that first quarterly report on the climate change and put stuff in like that, same like the electric vehicles, we haven't got them all in yet. So I think when we look at that, we'll have an update on that, see how well they're doing. But I think it does take some time to get somewhere on it. But yes, good idea. Thank you. Any other recommendations or requests on that? No. Anything from the forward plan that members would like to see come up next time? Yes. Most of those are on the forward plan but which, yeah, Claire.
On the forward plan, and this is something that's going to cabinet, the allocations of the DLUHC homelessness grants.
No, that's coming to this next cabinet. Yeah.
When we get the report that we're getting, an update from the strategic housing manager, possibly come to be scheduled. I think that's something that we should look at.
Okay, yeah.
In relation again to the Lord Lister.
Okay, we can pick that up later. We can't pick up for this one, obviously, because we'll be past the dates, but we'll pick it up at a later stage. And the developer SPDs we've already got down as one of the ones we want to see. Okay, so that the recommendations are that the committee prioritised proposed topics for inclusion in the work programme. It's Appendix A, and where appropriate terms of high level form. Time of the scrutiny input. The committee, having considered the most recent iteration of the forward plan, suggests a list of items to be considered, and that the corporate peer challenge action plan extract as Appendix C be considered, which we haven't done at this one because we're waiting to see the new one actually. So I think that one's a little bit redundant now, that last bit. So we'll take that last bit off, strike that one off, and we'll wait to see the new one. Most of what has been done, we could have been done, has been done on it, because that one was the one where we got COVID in the middle of it, so we couldn't carry out things. So I think the more up to date one would be more appropriate to follow, because I'm sure they will pick up anything that wasn't actioned last time that they feel should be actioned. So I think what we'll do is we'll change that to when we've seen a new one, we'll add that in. Can I have a proposer for those recommendations, please? Adam, thank you. Seconder, Ian. Go to the vote.
Chair, that motion's carried.
Thank you very much, everybody. That concludes our business for tonight. And our next meeting, as we said earlier, is on the 24th of January, 2023. I mean, it says 2022, but I think it's 2023.